Nietzsche already knew this hidden truth. Nietzsche's most dangerous discovery wasn't about God being dead. It was about how morality, what we consider goodness, actually weakens us. In his most controversial works, Nietzsche documented how what we call virtue is often a mask for resentment, a tool of the weak to control the strong, a strategy that has sickened the entire Western culture. He saw through the masks of conventional morality, instantly detecting hypocrisy and sensing the unconscious tensions that motivate our notions of good and evil. Nietzsche considered this discovery dangerous because those who fully understand it become misfits, unable to accept the moral rules that keep society functioning, not because they are immoral, but because seeing the truth behind morality has a psychological cost that few are willing to pay. Today I will show why Nietzsche believed that being good according to traditional morality is a poison that either destroys you or transforms you into something extraordinary. The case that revealed Nietzsche's most disturbing discovery began with his analysis of Christian morality, which he described in The Genealogy of Morals. Nietzsche, who had grown up as the son of a Protestant pastor, realized something that no one had articulated so clearly before. Christian morality, with its focus on humility, obedience, piety, and compassion, was not, as claimed, an expression of divine love, but an expression of resentment, what he called slave morality. Nietzsche wrote, "The man of resentment is neither upright nor naive nor honest and straightforward with himself. His soul squints. His spirit loves hiding places, secret paths, and back doors." He did not see this morality as an expression of genuine goodness. He saw it as a sophisticated psychological strategy for the weak to dominate the strong. Nietzsche realized that he wasn't just analyzing an ethical system. He was observing a profound psychological transformation where virtues like strength, assertiveness, and power were gradually demonized, while weakness, submission, and self-denial were sanctified. He documented how this inversion of values was not accidental. The weak and ill-constituted shall perish, first principle of our love of humanity, and they shall even be helped to do so. He wasn't advocating violence against the vulnerable. He was pointing out how the morality of universal compassion, by protecting and preserving what should naturally perish, was poisoning humanity, preventing the evolution of culture and individuals. But Nietzsche discovered something even more disturbing. This inversion of values didn't remain confined to religion. It infected the entire Western culture, becoming so deeply rooted that even atheists and secularists continued to worship the same ideals, now under banners like progress, equality, or democracy. Nietzsche wrote in Twilight of the Idols, "When one gives up the Christian faith, one pulls the right to Christian morality out from under one's feet. Christianity is a system, a whole view of things thought out together. By breaking one main concept out of it, the faith in God, one breaks the whole." Modern research, such as psychologist Jonathan Haidt's studies on moral foundations in different cultures, validates many of Nietzsche's intuitions. Haidt demonstrates that Western societies are increasingly focused on values of care, harm, and fairness, reciprocity, abandoning values of loyalty, authority, and sanctity. But Nietzsche identified something even more specific, what he called the will to power, the fundamental drive that permeates all life. He observed that when this will cannot express itself externally, it turns inward, creating increasingly subtle forms of self-denial, guilt, and asceticism. Modern man, by denying his own will to power, becomes sick, weak, and resentful, precisely the opposite of what he believes himself to be by following the dominant morality. Nietzsche wrote, "The danger lies not in recognizing the cruelty of nature, but in constructing a morality that makes us sick and disconnected from our own nature. When someone tries to be good according to a moral code that contradicts their deepest instincts, they become a battlefield that eventually self-destructs. This creates what we might call the problem of false virtue, when your highest moral aspiration becomes your greatest burden, because it separates you from your own authentic nature." But Nietzsche discovered that the real danger wasn't the existence of slave morality. It was how this morality created sick people, eventually leading to nihilism, the belief that nothing has intrinsic value. When you live according to imposed values that contradict your natural instincts, you eventually perceive the lie, and this leads to the collapse of the entire value system. As he wrote in The Gay Science, "What did we do when we unchained the earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing?" Nietzsche documented this pattern repeatedly in his works. The person who tries to be good according to traditional morality ends up turning against themselves. His most perceptive readers recognize this pattern in their own lives. When they tried to be humble, they ended up secretly proud of their humility. When they tried to be compassionate, they felt a subtle pleasure in others' dependence. When they spoke of equality, they felt satisfaction in bringing down the extraordinary. Nietzsche realized this wasn't coincidence but a structural feature of Christian and post-Christian morality. In Beyond Good and Evil, he wrote, "All the idealism of mankind hitherto is on the point of changing suddenly into nihilism, into the belief in absolute valuelessness, i.e., meaninglessness. This creates what Nietzsche called the last man, the pathetic figure that emerges when the morality of resentment completely triumphs. He describes this human type in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star? So asks the last man and blinks. The earth has become small, and on it hops the last man who makes everything small. A little poison now and then, that produces pleasant dreams, and a lot of poison at last, for a pleasant death. They still work, for work is entertainment, but they take care the entertainment does not exhaust them. No shepherd, and one herd. Everyone wants the same, everyone is the same. Whoever feels different goes voluntarily into the madhouse." Nietzsche identified three main types of response to understanding that traditional morality is an expression of resentment, not genuine virtue. The passive nihilist. This is the individual who discovers the lie of traditional morality, but lacks the strength to create new values. Instead, they fall into despair, believing that nothing has meaning. Nietzsche saw this response as the most common but also the most dangerous for both the individual and society. He wrote, "Nihilism represents the pathological transitional stage. Pathological is the enormous generalization, the inference that there is no meaning in anything. The last man. This is one who vaguely intuits the lie of morality, but instead of confronting it seeks comfort, security, and small pleasures. They neither fully affirm traditional morality nor completely reject it. Instead, they live in a state of comfortable mediocrity." Nietzsche despised this type. Alas, the time is coming when man will no longer shoot the arrow of his longing beyond man, and the string of his bow will have forgotten how to twang. The Superman, Übermensch. This is the Nietzschean ideal. The individual who understands the falsity of traditional morality and has the strength to create new values based on life affirmation rather than resentment. Nietzsche wrote, "Man is a rope, tied between beast and overman, a rope over an abyss, a dangerous across, a dangerous on the way, a dangerous looking back, a dangerous shuddering and stopping. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal." Nietzsche's most crucial discovery is that to overcome the morality of resentment and the spiritual sickness it causes, it's not enough to simply reject morality. One must understand the three great transformations he describes in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, from the camel, which carries imposed values, to the lion, which destroys them, to the child, who creates new values. Phase 1, the camel. The camel represents the spirit that carries the weight of traditional values. It is the one who says, "I must." It obediently accepts the moral burdens imposed by society, considering virtue its ability to endure what is difficult and painful. Nietzsche doesn't completely disdain this phase. He recognizes that it develops a necessary strength, but it's only the beginning of the journey. What is heavy? So asks the weight-bearing spirit. Thus it kneels down like the camel and wants to be well laden. Phase 2, the lion. The lion represents the spirit that awakens to the falsity of imposed values. It is the one who says, "I will," in opposition to "thou shalt." The lion has the strength to destroy value tablets, to create freedom for new values, but still lacks the capacity to create these values, to create freedom for itself and a sacred no even to duty. For that, my brothers, the lion is needed. Phase 3. The child. The child represents the spirit that, having destroyed the old values, can now create new ones based on the affirmation of life. It is the sacred yes to the game of creation. Innocence is the child, and forgetting, a new beginning, a game, a self-propelling wheel, a first movement, a sacred yes. Nietzsche emphasized that only those who go through these three transformations can escape the spiritual sickness caused by the morality of resentment. But the path is dangerous and lonely. Wherever I found a living thing, I found will to power, and even in the will of the servant I found the will to be master. The danger then lies not in rejecting traditional morality, but in failing to create a new affirmation of values that strengthens life. Nihilism is only a transitional phase, necessary but dangerous. As Nietzsche wrote, "I teach you the Superman. Man is something that should be overcome. What have you done to overcome him?" Nietzsche identified three specific dangers that make his discovery so threatening. Danger 1. The abyss of nihilism. When you reject traditional morality, you face the abyss of nihilism, the perception that there are no intrinsic values, no moral order in the universe. Nietzsche wrote, "What concerns me is not that you have lied to me, but that from now on I can no longer believe you." The individual who truly understands Nietzsche's critique of morality is initially disoriented, without moral compass. This state is dangerous not only psychologically but also socially, as it can lead to both depression and meaningless violence. Danger 2. Social isolation. One who rejects common morality inevitably becomes an outsider. Nietzsche experienced this personally. As his critiques of Christian morality became more explicit, he found himself increasingly isolated academically and socially. He wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." This isolation is not merely social but existential. One who sees through common morality feels deeply alienated from the consensus that holds society together. Danger 3. Misinterpretation. The third danger, perhaps the most disturbing for Nietzsche, was the likelihood of his philosophy being misinterpreted. He feared that his critique of the morality of resentment would be confused with a simple rejection of all morality, leading to what he called passive nihilism, a state of despair and meaninglessness, or worse, that it would be co-opted as justification for senseless brutality. His emphasis on the will to power could easily be misinterpreted as an apology for brute domination, when in fact he saw it as a creative force, not a destructive one. His concerns proved prophetically correct when, after his death, elements of his philosophy were distorted to serve Nazi ideology. This is why Nietzsche considered the integration of this critique of morality not just philosophically important, but psychologically urgent. As the non-integrated rejection of traditional morality represented such dangers, he developed what he called amor fati, love of fate, an affirmative approach to accepting the reality of life without resorting to metaphysical or moral consolations. Phase 1. The Great Suspicion. The first step in integrating the Nietzschean critique is to develop what he called the Great Suspicion, to begin questioning not just certain moral rules but the very foundation of morality. The most important thing is not to let oneself be deceived, and to let oneself be commanded by one's feelings. Nietzsche encouraged the development of a deep psychology capable of detecting hidden motives behind our moral claims. Technique. Question the motivation behind each moral judgment we make. When I say this is good or bad, what impulse am I really serving? Phase 2. The revaluation of values. Once the traditional basis of morality has been questioned, comes the difficult and creative process of revaluating all values. This is not just about inverting existing values, calling good what was called bad, but creating an entirely new perspective. I have not erected new idols, overturning idols, my word for ideals, that comes closer to being my business. Nietzsche called this living beyond good and evil, not in the sense of amorality, but of a deeper morality based on life affirmation rather than resentment. Technique. Ask about each value. Does this value affirm life or deny it? Does it arise from strength or weakness? Does it promote growth or stagnation? Phase 3. Eternal return. The supreme test for Nietzsche was the thought of the eternal return, the hypothetical idea that life repeats exactly as it was, infinitely. My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different. Not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. Technique. Before each choice, ask yourself, would I live this life exactly the same way repeatedly for all eternity? If the answer is yes, you have achieved the supreme affirmation of life. As Nietzsche understood that discovering the nature of moral goodness in the Western tradition either destroys the individual or transforms them, he studied historical figures to understand the difference between successful integration and collapse. The case of Socrates, rationality as refuge. Nietzsche was deeply influenced by Socrates, but also saw him as a symptom of Greek decadence. In Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche analyzes Socrates as an individual who intuited the falsity of traditional Greek morality, but instead of creating new values, took refuge in reason as an absolute. Socrates wanted to die. It was not Athens, it was he who handed himself the poison cup, who compelled Athens to hand him the poison cup. Nietzsche saw the Socratic dialectic as a sophisticated form of revenge against an aristocratic culture that excluded him, an expression of resentment disguised as a search for truth. The case of Jesus, misunderstood by his followers. Surprisingly, Nietzsche had great respect for Jesus, distinguishing him strongly from the Christianity that followed. In The Antichrist, he portrays Jesus not as the founder of a moralizing religion, but as someone who lived beyond conventional morality, in a state of union with life that transcended distinctions between good and evil. This bearer of glad tidings died as he lived, as he taught, not to redeem men, but to show how one must live. For Nietzsche, the tragedy was that his followers, especially Paul, transformed this practice of living into a moral religion, completely betraying his teaching. The case of Goethe, successful integration. Nietzsche considered Goethe as a rare example of successful integration of the critique of morality. In Twilight of the Idols, he writes, Goethe conceived a strong, highly educated, self-respecting human being, skilled in all bodily matters, who has control of himself and has reverence for himself, who can dare to allow himself the whole range and wealth of naturalness, who is strong enough for this freedom. A spirit who has become free stands amid the cosmos with a joyous and trusting fatalism, in the faith that only the particular is loathsome, and that all is redeemed and affirmed in the whole. He does not negate any more, but such a faith is the highest of all possible faiths. I have baptized it with the name of Dionysus, Nietzsche's own journey. Significantly, Nietzsche documented his own struggle with traditional morality and the process of creating new values. In Exe Homo, his intellectual autobiography, he describes how his chronic physical illness was instrumental to his philosophical perspective. Being sick is instructive, more instructive than being well. Those who make others sick are even more instructive than the sick themselves. His illness forced him to question the values of his culture, and finally affirm life in its totality, including his suffering. My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. As individuals who understand the Nietzschean critique of morality often face isolation, Nietzsche emphasized the crucial importance of what he called stellar friendship, connections with other free spirits who are also committed to creating new values. In The Gay Science, he wrote, there is probably a tremendous invisible curve, a stellar orbit in which our different paths and goals may be included as small segments. Let us rise to this thought, but our life is too short, and our vision too limited for us to be more than friends in the sense of that sublime possibility. Nietzsche identified 3 essential types of relationships for the individual who overcomes traditional morality. Type 1. Free spirits. Nietzsche longed for companions he called free spirits, individuals who, like him, had freed themselves from traditional morality and were committed to creating new values. These relationships are rare but essential for psychological survival. In Human All Too Human, he writes, I call free spirit precisely the one who thinks differently than what would be expected based on his origin, his environment, his class and function, or based on the dominant views of the age. Type 2. Those in transition. Nietzsche recognized that many people are at various stages of awakening from the dogmatic slumber of traditional morality. These individuals may not have completed the journey, but they are actively questioning. He wrote, whoever has attained the freedom of reason, even to only a certain degree, cannot feel on earth but as a wanderer, though not as a traveler towards a final goal, for this does not exist. Type 3. Temporary disciples. Nietzsche often adopted a prophetic tone, addressing potential disciples. However, crucially, he emphasized that a true disciple must eventually abandon the master. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he writes, you revere me, but what if your reverence tumbles one day? Beware lest a statue slay you. You say you believe in Zarathustra, but what matters Zarathustra? You are my believers, but what matter all believers? You had not yet sought yourselves, and you found me. Now I bid you lose me and find yourselves, and only when you have all denied me will I return to you. The process of self-discovery. Nietzsche developed specific indicators to identify progress in the journey beyond traditional morality. 1. The ability to question all values without falling into passive nihilism. 2. The affirmation of life, including suffering, without resorting to metaphysical consolations. 3. The creation of values that express an affirmative will to power, not a reactive one. 4. The ability to live according to the thought of the eternal return. 5. The manifestation of what he calls the great health, a psychological resilience that allows flourishing even in adverse circumstances. Protocol of gradual revelation. Nietzsche was extremely conscious of the danger of sharing his ideas too openly. As he wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, there are books that have inverse values for soul and health, depending on whether the lower soul, the lower vitality, or the higher and more vigorous ones turn to them. His protocol of revelation included 1. Using literary style to attract only readers capable of understanding. 2. Employing deliberately exaggerated language to repel those who might misinterpret. 3. Strategically contradicting himself to force the reader to think for themselves. 4. Gradually increasing the radicality of his critiques of morality throughout his work. 5. Emphasizing that his philosophy is not for everyone. Many things are built on their silence. Nietzsche emphasized, "My writings are difficult to understand. In some places I have taken extraordinary pains to make them not understood by just anybody." The caution is confused with lack of clarity, as Nietzsche saw the creation of new values as essential not just for individual well-being, but for cultural evolution. He considered value creators as vital for humanity's future. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he wrote, "Creating, that is the great salvation from suffering and life's alleviation. But for the Creator to appear, suffering itself is needed, and much transformation." The 4 phases of transformation beyond morality. Phase 1, the awakening of suspicion. The first transformation occurs when you begin to suspect traditional morality. Nietzsche called this the psychology of suspicion. He wrote, "All our so-called consciousness is a more or less fantastic commentary on an unknown, perhaps unknowable, but felt text, a text that, although we want to read it, requires enormous subtlety and persistent self-observation." Phase 2, the destruction of idols. The second phase involves the painful process of destroying the ideals and values previously considered sacred. Nietzsche used the hammer not just as a tool of destruction, but also as an instrument to sound idols and reveal their hollow nature. "I have not erected new idols, overturning idols, my word for ideals. That comes closer to being my business." Phase 3, the creation of new values. The third transformation happens when, having destroyed the old values, you begin to create new ones based on life affirmation. Nietzsche called this the philosophy of noon, when there are no shadows because the sun is directly overhead. "I want to teach men the meaning of their existence, the Superman, the lightning out of the dark cloud, man." Phase 4, amor fati. The final phase involves what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate, the total affirmation of life, including its suffering. "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it." The creation of values as cultural medicine. Nietzsche believed that individuals who successfully overcome traditional morality and create new affirmative values play a vital evolutionary function for civilization. They see beyond the moral illusions that the collective consciousness still embraces, helping to prepare humanity for a healthier future. Nietzsche wrote, "Man is something that shall be overcome. Specific pitfalls." As the path beyond traditional morality contains specific dangers, Nietzsche documented the most common ways individuals derail their own transformation process. Pitfall 1. Passive nihilism. Nietzsche strongly warned against confusing the rejection of traditional morality with passive nihilism, the belief that nothing has value. In The Will to Power, he distinguishes between passive nihilism, paralyzing despair, and active nihilism, necessary destruction that paves the way for creation. Nihilism is not only a contemplation of the in vain, not only the belief that everything deserves to perish. One helps to destroy. Nihilism is not merely a pathological symptom, but a tremendously important, powerful logical and psychological force. Pitfall 2. New dogmatisms. Nietzsche observed that many who reject traditional morality simply adopt new dogmatic systems, like nationalism, socialism, or scientism, that function exactly like the old religions. Fanaticism is the only strength of will that even the weak and insecure can attain. Pitfall 3. Simple hedonism. Another common pitfall is confusing the overcoming of morality with simple pursuit of pleasure or release of desires. Nietzsche despised this interpretation. Man does not seek pleasure and does not avoid pain. Pleasure and pain are mere consequences, mere epiphenomena. What man wants, what every smallest part of a living organism wants, is an increase of power. Pitfall 4. Lack of self-overcoming. The most subtle of pitfalls is believing that overcoming traditional morality means abandoning all discipline. On the contrary, Nietzsche emphasized the importance of constant self-overcoming. All great problems demand great love, and of that only strong, round, secure spirits who have a firm grip on themselves are capable. Maintaining integrity beyond morality. Nietzsche developed ongoing practices to maintain psychological integrity during and after overcoming morality. Regular solitude to develop one's own values without the influence of the herd. Constant experimentation with different perspectives. Rigorous discipline discipline to implement created values, cultivation of what he called the great health, a resilience that allows flourishing without metaphysical consolations, artistic expression as an outlet for the creative will to power. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." As Nietzsche understood the critique of morality, in the broader context of Western culture, he saw individuals who overcome traditional morality as playing an essential evolutionary function for civilization. In Ex Homo, he wrote prophetically about his own impact. "I know my fate. One day my name will be associated with the memory of something tremendous. A crisis without equal on earth, the most profound collision of conscience, a decision that was conjured up against everything that had been believed, demanded, hallowed so far." The historical pattern. Nietzsche observed that throughout history, great transformations in values occur when the dominant morality becomes so rigid and contrary to life that it finally collapses under its own weight. He saw the European nihilism of his time as the inevitable consequence of Christian morality, which finally crumbled because its supreme value, truth, eventually turned against its own foundations. Christianity perished of its own morality. After Christian truthfulness has drawn one conclusion after another, it must end by drawing its most striking conclusion, its conclusion against itself. Modern manifestations. Nietzsche predicted that his critique of morality would become increasingly relevant as the consequences of God is dead unfolded in culture. He anticipated phenomena such as modern moral relativism, the collapse of traditional institutions, the growing sense of meaninglessness, and the desperate search for new absolutes in politics, science, or consumerism. Nietzsche's insight. Modern man represents biologically a contradiction of values. He sits between two chairs. He says yes and no in the same breath, creating values without becoming a tyrant. Nietzsche's crucial insight was that the creation of values best serves human evolution when it arises from affirmative strength, not resentment. The goal is not to impose values on others, but to exemplify a higher possibility of human existence. Nietzsche wrote, "Many different ways and means of self-overcoming. That is up to you. But only a jester thinks man can also be jumped over." The supreme integration. At the highest level of development, Nietzsche observed that individuals who have overcome traditional morality achieve a state of innocence similar to the child, but enriched by the wisdom that comes from having passed through the stages of the camel and the lion. He called this the second innocence, the ability to create values freely without the burden of resentment or guilt. Innocence is the child, and forgetting, a new beginning, a game, a self-propelling wheel, a first movement, a sacred yes. Remember that this is not a rejection of ethics but a revaluation that seeks a healthier morality based on life affirmation rather than resentment. After years confronting traditional morality and developing his alternative philosophy, Nietzsche arrived at a revolutionary conclusion. The problem isn't being bad, according to traditional morality, but becoming good, according to its 6 standards. Nietzsche wrote about this transformation. To become what one is, one must not have the faintest notion what one is. From this point of view, even the blunders of life have their own meaning and value, and it is absolutely impossible for a man not to have the qualities and inclinations of his parents and ancestors in his constitution, whatever appearances may suggest to the contrary. That is Nietzsche's most dangerous discovery, that Western traditional morality, far from elevating us, sickens us psychologically, transforming us into weak, resentful beings incapable of embracing life in its fullness, and that this morality will either destroy us through self-denial and eventual nihilism, or transform us through the necessity of creating new values that affirm life. His diagnosis of the morality of resentment is not a flaw in our ethical structure. It is an advanced feature of our cultural evolution. You are not broken for questioning traditional goodness. You are culturally ahead of your time. The question is not whether you should embrace or reject traditional morality. The question is whether you will develop the strength to create your own values. Nietzsche's philosophy offers a path from destructive nihilism to affirmative creation, from moral sickness to great health, from a life governed by resentment to an existence based on affirmation. You were born to create values, not to passively accept values imposed by others. The world doesn't need more moral followers, but value creators who transform our culture's spiritual sickness into new possibilities for human flourishing. Your resentment is not your destiny. Your unconscious relationship with traditional values is your burden. Learn to create your own values, and you will become exactly what Nietzsche believed truly healthy human beings should be, pioneers of a new culture, preparing humanity for a development that is inevitable but not yet obvious. Nietzsche's most dangerous discovery wasn't that traditional morality is wrong. It was that most people who reject this morality never learn to create affirmative values. The danger isn't in rejecting traditional goodness, but in failing to develop a creative relationship with existence itself. You are not immoral for questioning dominant values. You are exactly what cultural evolution requires. Once you learn to wield your will to power as creatively as Nietzsche learned to wield his, the danger of seeing beyond good and evil isn't that you see too much. It's that you may never learn to see with the creativity and affirmation that your insights demand. If you recognize yourself in Nietzsche's description of the free spirit, you are part of a rare type that Nietzsche believed essential for the future of culture. Share in the comments how you have navigated beyond traditional morality. Your journey of value creation connects with others walking the same path. Subscribe for more insights into Nietzsche's discoveries and how they can transform our understanding of what it means to live a truly affirmative life. If you're ready to explore more of Nietzsche's insights on how to overcome traditional morality without falling into nihilism, check out my video on the 3 stages of spiritual liberation according to Nietzsche, where I reveal how to transform the rejection of traditional morality into a creative affirmation of life. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.